Hey, what's going on guys? Enrique here. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a timing job and a head gasket on a 2010 Honda Accord. This comes with the engine code K24Z3. This particular car had three error codes. One for the cams being out of phase. At first I thought it was just a VTC actuator, and I told him to order that part and I changed it for him. I also cleaned the VTC strainer because I heard sometimes old oil can get it gunked up and cause it not to change phases, so it could leave you in like VTEC mode, causing it to be hard to start or run rough, loss of power, all these things. It ended up not being that. It also gave me a code for the knock sensor. When I took this all apart, I figured out that the knock sensor actually had broken. The plastic looks like it got really hot and just broke. And I also had a code for the MAF sensor, mass airflow, and I replaced that. None of these things made it start. It had fuel pressure, spark plugs were new. So I went ahead and took out the valve cover, and I noticed the chain was stretched. Well, not necessarily stretched, but there was a lot of play in the chain, and there should be no play whatsoever. So with a leak down tester, which I will show right here, I hooked it up to a compressor. In case you guys don't know, you hook it up to a compressor, you put it in the valve, in the spark plug tube, and then you move the engine to top dead center on the cylinder you're doing it on, and it should give you a compression reading. It has two gauges, one for the in pressure and one's for the pressure that it's holding. About 10% is what's normal from what I read on the internet, but this engine had 30% loss on cylinder 1 and 3, and there was some kind of cross flow between 1 and 3, which was really odd that it would skip a cylinder, but that also told me that it needed a head gasket. So with the compression test, I saw that it needed valves, because when I went out of phase, the pistons hit, and this being an interference engine, it caused it to bend the valves. So if you guys don't know, Rock Auto is a great place to get your tools. I'm not sponsored, but I just love them because they're so much cheaper than the regular auto parts store. The only drawback is you have to wait for them, the mail, of course. So the head was $700. The chain and the VTC actuator, because I believe they come with a version 2 of them. I got from OEM Honda Accord parts, Peoria in Arizona. I mean, they were cheaper on Rock Auto, but I just didn't know if it was the second version or not. So I just went ahead and ordered the one from Honda. I also got a knock sensor, MAF sensor, and the VTC actuator like I told you before, and a head gasket kit. Oh, as well with the timing chain, of course, it's a full timing chain kit. It comes with the tensioner, the chain, and some guides. So now to get started, you probably want to get the car on the jack, put it on stands, and then remove the belly pan. Drain all the coolant. Just save yourself the hassle and drain the coolant now, because the intake has a couple ports and they will leak once you get it out, and you don't want to ruin that coolant by throwing it on the floor. It's better just to drain it now while you can, and as well remove the cover that goes in front of the grill, the plastic cover. That will make it easier to fetch your tools when they fall down. So I sped everything up because it's a pretty long video, but so far we've got the intake tube out and a couple looks like all the vacuum lines out, and there's a wiring harness as well right there, so you're going to remove all that, and then there's two there are two 12mm bolts at the bottom of the intake that once you remove the belly pan you can get to with an extension. And then there are, I believe, 5 or 3 or 4 on top and one right under the throttle body. And once you remove that, there's going to be a coolant line right under it, and there's also going to be a vacuum line on the passenger side. Just make sure you don't yank it out and break something. Well, this goes, I'm going to tell you everything that you need just so it's out. For this job, you're going to need a Honda crank pulley holder. You can rent AutoZone for $40 and you'll have it for 60 days. The $40 will be returned to you once you give it back. You're going to need breaker bar, a socket set, 12.14mm socket for the head bolts, 12-point socket, wrenches, preferably ratchet wrenches just to make it faster, screwdrivers just to fill up in a flat to get some clips out, and the Phillips to get the intake tube out, pliers, needle nose, and some regular pliers for the hose clamps and just in case anything falls. Like I said, the breaker bar with a 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter and a 3/8 to 1/2 adapter. I actually broke my 3/8 halfway through this, so I had to do everything with the little wrench, and it was not fun. So breaker bar is definitely a must. Flashlight and light, and torque wrenches. I had 2. I had a small one just for the heads, and I had a large one to torque the wheels, but I guess you could do without the big one. You're going to want to remove the battery as well while you're here. It'll just give you so much room. Okay, so once you get the plastic intake off, you're gonna want to start Alright, so once you get the plastic intake off, you're going to want to start on the metal middleman intake. I don't understand why they do two things. I'm guessing the plastic is cheaper, but it can't withstand the heat of touching the engine block, so I have to do this. I think it'd just be easier to do it old school, just all one metal intake. But whatever. I don't design cars. So I think there's 6 bolts, and some of them will come out as nuts and some of them will come out as studs. Later you're gonna have to take the studs out to put in the new head if you are replacing the head. It's probably easier to remove them while the head's on the car, but I don't know. I did it while it was on the floor. I think it was fine. Here, you're going to remove the bracket for the power steering and just move it aside. You can even undo the line and just stuff a napkin and move the line back just so you have a little more room. And the AC line kind of bends a little bit. You can kind of move it to a little bit forward or backwards. Just don't mistreat it. If that breaks, you don't want the customer to be without power or air conditioning. Once you get all that out, on the driver's side, there's I believe 3 12mm nuts for the upper radiator hose that connects to the head. Obviously coolant flows through there, so like I said earlier, taking out the coolant is a big plus. There's also a couple, I think there's one more 10mm holding in the wiring harness for the fuel rail and for just miscellaneous wires, I guess. So you're gonna see me take out the motor mounts soon, but I would go ahead and start taking out the crank pulley first, just because you're gonna need so much torque, and every time you pull on it, the engine's gonna move. I just didn't want to risk breaking anything, although I broke my adapter doing this. You're definitely going to want to be as close as possible to the pulley, so you're not losing any of that force. Yeah, that adapter I broke. So you're not losing any of the force of the extension. But take the harmonic balancer out. Once you get the nut out and you put the holder that you got from AutoZone back on, there's going to be a little metal spine, metal, what's the 3D version of a rectangle? I can't think right now, but there's going to be a little metal thing in the middle, and you want that at 12 o'clock. So when you remove it, there should be an arrow on the block and an arrow on the sprocket that line up, and at 7 o'clock there will be a little dot that you will use for timing. This is useful, the little arrow at 12 o'clock, so the piston could be a top dead center, so when you remove the valves it's just easier, so you don't have to go back and put the pulley back on and move it just to time it. So just leave it there, and you don't have to touch it until you finish. And then after you get the harmonic balancer out, you're going to grab the jack that came with the car, preferably a jack that it's not hydraulic, so it can just stay there for a long time without going down. And then you're going to jack up the engine just the slightest bit, not too much. You don't want the whole engine weight on it. There's still 2 other motor mounts holding the engine in, so just a little bit, and then remove the motor mount on the passenger side, so you can go ahead and start getting the timing cover out. So yeah, I had to take it out and I just put it back in, but while I did that, I removed the timing cover bolts, which I believe are 10mm. Some of them are hard to get, but I will show you a picture here showing you how many they are, because I could not find one of them for the life of me, and I thought it was the glue that they used, but it was a bolt. Right now I am taking out the O2 sensor wire. I'm unplugging it because I don't have a O2 sensor socket to kind of let the wire go in and then unscrew it, and it's caved in, so you can't just use pliers. So I had to kind of just open up the hole of the heat shield a little bit extra to let it go through. The bolts weren't too tight. I really thought they were going to be seized, but they were alright. Really just, it didn't take much force. It's just nice because it's not in a fun place. Now you want to remove the oil pressure switch, I believe it is. It's right next to the exhaust manifold, and it's held in by four 10mm bolts. They're kind of long, but you have to make sure that you're removing the right ones, because certain ones right next to those are just holding in the bracket to put the wires in. So just four. You'll know which ones they are. I mean, just shine a flashlight back there and you'll see them. But it's four. There'll also be a little bit oil going down there, but it's really not much. Most of the oil stays in the oil pan while the engine's off, especially if it's been off for a minute. Well, more than a minute, but if it's been off. Here you can see the last bolt that I couldn't find. It's the one right above the BTC actuator. Don't forget to take that out as well. It's a little cylinder thing right under the cam gears, and it's held in by a 10mm bolt as well, but this one's kind of a special bolt. It's like protruding a little bit extra. It has like a nail. Then after you get the timing cover out, you're gonna want to remove all the gunk that's left on the mating surface, just so it seals well. It doesn't have to be perfect, just make sure you get all the big chunks out and all the surrounding stuff. You don't want this to leak, especially because it's so hard to it's so difficult to get to it. So do it right once and you don't have to do it again. This particular car happened to have just a faulty tensioner, so maybe that's what caused it to go out of time. But either way, the chain should be replaced, because you don't want to take any chances, and if it is stretched, I don't believe you can tell exactly. You have to look at each link and measure them. You don't want to do that. Just save yourself the hassle and get the chain, if you're lucky enough not to have any bent valves. So here I am removing I'm actually loosening the lifter springs, just the slightest, so they don't have that pressure. And then I'm starting to remove the brackets that hold in the cam. They also have a specific pattern of undoing them, just because they have a lot of pressure, and if you take out one side all at once, it might just give it some weird pressure and mess it up. Especially if you're not replacing the head, you're going to want to be careful. Right here, you see me struggling trying to take this out, but you see I'm using a big flathead, and you can just pry on the ends because there's these little tubes that kind of guide it in to the right spot. Pulling on the cams with the bolts doesn't do the trick because the thread is actually on the head itself and not on the top part, so you're just doing nothing. As you can see here, that's the 12 point, and that's the sequence that you need to untighten it with. The head bolts are really tight, especially if you don't have a breaker bar or you broke your extension. So I had to use just a regular wrench, a wrench, just a regular wrench at the end of the ratchet to try to break it loose. But doing this with an extension is not recommended, just because you can either break your ratchet or you can strip the bolts. I'm not even sure if you can strip a 12 point, but to not take any chances, I went ahead and used the smallest socket I had and applied the best directional pressure I could. Yeah, and there was no chance that air ratchet was going to do the trick. Probably need an impact for that, but I don't recommend using an impact on head bolts. And you want to do it slowly. You want to untighten the bolts 30% at a time, although I did it way less than 30% just because they were so tight. I did maybe like a quarter turn each time, and after 3 or 4 times they started to get really loose, so then I did some more, but there were no task. I know I'm skinny, but they were tight, especially with that small ratchet. It was not fun. That was probably the hardest part of the job. So once you get the bolts out, you're going to want to clean the surface and obviously put the new head gasket in. Watch out, because there will be these little guiding tube things on the front, on the intake side, that help you put the head in the right spot and just guide it in, so you don't have to keep wiggling it around every time, potentially damaging the gasket or the surface, which you want to be smooth. But clean it. Use some brake clean, not directly on the head, but some brake clean on the napkin, and just clean it, even though it's a metal gasket and it leaves no residue, just to make sure. Here I'm laying it down, and those things definitely make it a lot easier, especially because of the angle it's at. I bet it would slide off if it wasn't for those. You also want to spray some air in the holes where the studs go in, just to make sure there's no debris or anything blocking it from going in. And if you don't have anti-seize like these new head bolts came with, then you should probably use some motor oil to lubricate the bolt going in. It makes it so you have an accurate torque reading. And yeah, you definitely want to have the right torque reading on the head bolts. If not, you're gonna have a bad head gasket, and then you have to do it all over again. So do it right once. Sequence to tighten the bolts. I tightened all just until they were tight, and then I torqued it. It's supposed to torque at 29 foot-pounds, and then another quarter turn just another quarter turn regardless. And then if they're new, then another quarter turn. So I ended up doing 29 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. Be careful with these rocker arms, I'm guessing. They have little springs in them to get the VTEC engaged, or the variable valve timing, whatever you want to call it. So you want to be careful. The manual also has the specific way to put those in, just in case they do fall out. And as you can see, I have kept everything in cardboard, just because it's a nice way to keep everything organized. You don't want to be guessing where bolts go. They make the job a lot longer. These get tightened down to 16 foot-pounds, except for the two at the end. Those get torqued down to 8 foot-pounds. No extra turns after that, but just go back and make sure they're 16 after you tighten all of them, because they might come loose. The timing job is not as fun as one might think. Or it's easy as you might think. Alright, so now that you have the brackets put on, you want to torque the intake side sprocket to 83 foot-pounds. I just had to convert it because I had to use the small torque wrench. Even if I want to use the big one, it doesn't fit there, so small one. And then the large, or the exhaust side, gets torqued down to 53 foot-pounds. I already torqued the intake side off camera, just because I didn't think it was recording. And then the exhaust side wasn't as tight, luckily, but I locked it down with some what would that be, a pipe wrench, I think it is. And then to time it, you're gonna need to line up the arrow on the brackets on the intake side. There's an arrow right at the top, 12 o'clock, that will match with an arrow on the sprocket side, and then those two line up, and then there's two lines that kind of look at each other at the both of the sprockets. And at the bottom, if you did the part earlier correct, you will have a little dot at 7 o'clock. So that's the optimal starting point to time it, just because it's easier. But then you put the chain on and everything will move. So it's just a little bit trial and error. What I found best is to do the exhaust side, aka the small sprocket, and then do the bottom, and do that as best as you can. And then with a wrench you can move the intake side, just because it's a little springy. And then you put the chain on and put it on all of them. And if you do it like I told you, the exhaust and the bottom will be correct. It will be on the dot at 6 o'clock. And the gold link will be on the other dot on the intakes, on the exhaust side. And then you can just make the chain skip by moving it with a wrench and pulling up on the chain. It's not the easiest task, but it will do the job. Also, all of this with the guides off. Do all of this with the guides off, just because it's easier. The exhaust guide can stay on, because it's simpler that way. And something else I forgot to mention is if you do have a new head, you're gonna have to move all the studs from the old one to the new one. And I'll show you how to do that. Just right here, you just put a little nut on top of the other one, and pull out. Just make sure not to use a ratchet wrench, because if you, like I showed you in the video, just don't use one of those. Just use a regular one, so you can take it out, or use the other side of it. Just don't lock it in there, because it only goes one way, and if the nut gets stuck and the stud comes out, there's no way to take out the nut on top without putting it back in and taking it out again. Yeah, that's just a little trick to not go through what I went through. Besides that, taking it apart is about the same as putting it back in, so you should have that in the bag. Honestly, it's really not that hard. Make sure you get all your bolts in the right place. Make sure to stay organized, because you don't want to. Make sure you stay organized. It makes everything a lot simpler. And remember to put the coolant back in, and everything should be good. Check your time 1 or 2 times. Rotate the engine. It takes a bunch of times to get it exactly to the same place before the gold links will shift like 1 bit. But all you need to do to check time is make sure that the cylinders are top dead center, and that the arrow is matching up with the dot on the intake side, and both of the sprockets are looking at each other with a little dash. And yeah, you should be in time. As you can see here, it's smoking a little bit. I actually used oil to lubricate the cams since they were new, and I accidentally spilled some on the exhaust manifold, and that's what's making it smoke. But after it went away, it's all fine. And yeah, that should be it for this video. I appreciate you watching, and like I said at the beginning of the video, this is not the type of videos I do, but I didn't find too much information on how to do this, so I had to read the manual, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to show you guys. So again, thank you very much. I'll see you next time.